Hi, everybody, and it's me, myself, and I, because somehow or another, my guest who's never done StreamYard before hadn't found us yet. I started. She was supposed to meet with me at 12:45, and she commented last night she knew she was going to do that. I don't know what's happened, but I'm watching for her. So when she enters the studio, we can go and we can do this thing. I'm going to mark a couple questions that have already shown up in the England. No, I haven't gone. I'm going this Saturday, Sunday, to my grandchildren in Austin. And I'm going to take them their gifts, which are these three-dimensional puzzles. One builds a steam engine that moves, and the other one builds a magic jewelry box where you flip different switches and drawers shoot out of everywhere. Anyway, it's kind of fun. Sorry about the phone ringing, but I have to keep it ringing. So if she calls me, I'll know what she's saying. I just checked. There's no messages anywhere. And that's okay. Okay, it says my phone just told me I have a show called Findhorn Live. Thank you, phone. Anyway, Kathleen's a lovely lady, but I don't know what's happened, and I'm sure I'll find out eventually. So we're going to go ahead with the show because the first part of the show is just going to be me flapping my lips and talking about it. And I put together some banners for you. Oh, no banners. Y'all know this one. If you have questions, put them. I caught the early questions that weren't in caps. Okay, I've got, this was one of the first comments I got about this show. And she said she loves this. And so do I. I think it's so much fun to learn about new things that I didn't know about before. I actually kind of did know about Findhorn because I'm so old, guys. I read about it as an adult in the 1970s, and they were just coming into their own. And I'm going to do a whole. Here she is, Kathleen. We're on. You're live. They've been waiting for you.
Okay. I'm sorry. I didn't realize I had to do that, get a different browser, but I managed.
Oh, I'm sorry. I with StreamYard, you never know, but
Yeah.
you're here, and that's what's really important.
That's right.
So I was showing them. This was one of the first comments I got when they love this stuff. She was so excited that we're going to be doing this today. And the next one is a woman named Lucy who went to Findhorn 40 years ago. And
Wow.
found it quite magical. And so I'm sure this will kind of be a trip down memory lane for her.
Mm-hmm.
Um, these are questions people get, and I take questions that people put below when I send out the invitation. And this woman, we've done a show on trees. Okay, we've done a show on feeling the energy of trees, which Kathleen will go into how they work with learning the energy of plants and things at Findhorn. But this woman, Vicky, you live in a subdivision that has no trees in the backyard, but two maple trees in the front. But it's such a crowded subdivision. Am I less likely to be able to communicate with the elementals here? She means the ones that might be in the trees. I think as good a shot as any tree. I mean, what I don't know how this jives with what you learned, Kathleen, but we had a guy named Daniel on, and he says to stand in front of the tree with your hands this way, but down towards the tree, accepting the energy of the tree. Stand just a little way away from it with your eyes closed. And if the tree pulls you in, there's energy that can speak with you. If it doesn't, it'll actually push you away. So I've had several people that went out and tried this in their own yards. And one woman was sure it was this huge, magnificent tree that she used to always go sit under. And it ended up the tree that pulled her in was a tiny little maple at the back. So you never know, right?
Right.
Do you want to talk a little bit about your experience of learning plants?
Well, I think with that question, that specific question, what I was taught there was that it isn't an individual tree that you need to communicate with necessarily, that as long as there's a living being in front of you, you can reach out to that. and you kind of connect with the whole species of maple, if this is a maple, not so much this one particular tree, although your answer may come, I guess, if you have a communion with it, may come from that. But I think what I was taught is that it's the whole species that is responding to you, that they are one entity, even though they may appear separate, like humans appear separate.
Yeah, but see, I think that's part of what, when a lot of people are starting to do this, are transitioning from being totally ego based to being more open. And I think in that way, what Daniel taught them was they would be more comfortable with individuation of a tree instead of, I mean, I love when you start talking about that with me on Sunday about the air plant that you used to watch and became aware of the whole species of air plants through that one plant. I thought that's fascinating. But I guess I'm still too ego based. I'd still be looking for my tree.
Right.
But you may be right. It may be giving us a little taste. I can imagine if you got sucked in to a whole tree species at one fell swoop, that might be a bit more than most of us could handle. And then the next,
I actually think it's the opposite. If
oh
I
really?
went to a forest of pines, if each pine started trying to communicate, it would be overwhelming. Where if they're standing together, so what I mean is that, or what I believe anyway, is that there's not a personality of individual necessarily trees. They just have a pine nest, a maple nest that they communicate through. So
okay. I'm going to change our views. Okay, now I can see a little. I see more of your face. So
yeah,
there you go.
my thing a little bit.
Your camera's doing good though. There's no problem with that.
Right.
Mine was just, I realized you could see the trash in the back of my office. I think that's fascinating. And we're going to talk about that. I've got that in my list of questions to talk to you about. But we have one more question that came in early in comments. And it kind of relates to something you and I sort of talked about. Anna Banana is a reader. And she said, well, I believe it's a wonderful way to live, to be more in tune with the planet. How do you overcome the generational conditioning of self-evaluation over community cooperation? And you talked about that a little bit, that when you get, can you explain Findhorn and how its work groups work?
Self-elevation. Okay, that I understand. Well, I might use the word, if I may, self-interest, just so I can understand it more. I think this is the ultimate, the $64 million question in people living in intentional communities or living as a global citizen even. Why is our country more important than other people's countries, or whatever the situation may be? I think that what my experience has shown me, if there is no overriding higher purpose, it's very hard to find an overriding communal interest. Meaning, if we're just relying on ourselves and our own self-interest, I think it's going to be very difficult to put that aside, because what are we putting it aside for? Not a higher interest. And when I say higher interest, I'm saying some sort of call it, I don't know what the 12 steps call it, but if you don't believe in God, can you say higher power? Or if you do believe in God, then that would be the higher being that is overriding our life here on earth, or life in the universe, whatever. So if you don't have that common belief that there is something higher than ourselves, bigger than ourselves, then I think it's very difficult to overcome the self-interest or the elevation of the self. That's why spiritual communities, just like congregations or churches or name it, they have a higher purpose, whatever it may be, even if it's just their aspirational intentions. And Findhorn has that higher purpose. So you get to actually experience what it's like to put your self-interest aside for the common good without feeling disgruntled or not heard.
Mm-hmm.
You willingly make that sacrifice for the common good, knowing you in the end will benefit as well.
Okay. For those who don't know, I did a show on Findhorn, but not everyone sees every one of my shows. I'm shocked. Anyway, this is the first thing I'm going to talk about. Findhorn Ecovillage is located on the North Sea of northern Scotland. It grew from the experiences of Peter and Eileen Caddy and Dorothy Maclean. The Caddy sons lived with them also. I'll give them the quick fix on what happened. The Caddy and Dorothy lost their jobs at a hotel near there, and all they had to live in was the Caddy's caravan. And they ended up living on a little spit of land that was next to an Air Force base. And it wasn't just next to the Air Force base, it had originally been the Air Force base's dump site. And they moved on there, and they couldn't make it on the amount of money the British government was getting. This was in the 1960s. And so they asked the farmer who actually owned the land if they could farm on it. And he looked at them like they were nuts. It's a sandy spit of land with the North Sea on one side, and you think you're going to grow something. And I'm sure after the man quit laughing, he said, sure, fine. And they went in there and they made it a working farm. And this is kind of the timeline on it. The growth of Findhorn. In the 1960s, it grew with the help that what happened was, who had the first encounter with the energies on the land?
It was Dorothy. That was her gift, was spoke with
And she's written a whole lot of books. And I'm going to lead you at the end of this to a way to get in touch with Findhorn and to find their foundation site. And it, by the way, is their 60th anniversary this week, isn't it?
Yeah, this week.
Yeah.
Having all kinds of celebrations.
Dorothy kind of said, I feel that we should do it this way. And so Peter, in the Findhorn literature, they imply he sort of listened to his intuition strongly and how he did everything before they started this farm. But this became the living proof of it. He and his wife went along with it, and they planted the things according to Dorothy. And she wrote down, and she's written a ton of books, starting in 1971 up until 2010. And then she died in 2020. She was 100 years old. But they became, and what happened is once they started getting things going in the early 60s, they got some other environmentalists in England and New Age pioneers to come in and help a little bit with the money, but they founded the foundation, and then they went to this. They developed it. They had a couple show up from America, I believe, and they helped them develop the spiritual curriculum and to expand their outreach to explain to people what they were doing. And guys, this is like the quickest, meanest little timeline you've ever seen. And then in 1980, they founded the Ecovillage project at Findhorn. They developed homes built from completely recycled materials. Like there's apparently a whiskey distillery near them. And they would get all the casks that had outdone their usefulness with them, and they'd take the wood and make that into homes and stuff. They also built wind turbines. By the end of the 80s, was providing 100% of their energy. And they also created what they called the living machine, which was a way of reprocessing all of their waste products so that they weren't polluting anywhere. And then what happened to them next? And by that time, Peter had left and was going around Europe and helping create ecovillages. And Dorothy was in the States by that time, from one of the things I read. She was living in the Northwest. Anyway, in 1990, GEN, the Global Eco Village Network, with the UN, was developed to create sustainable living into the 21st century. And then right now is its 60th anniversary. And then the end of all this, we kind of did this backwards because I didn't know you needed a different browser, nor did you.
Mm-hmm.
This is Kathleen Burke, past student and resident from Findhorn. what I like about it is it has people living with such a sense of community. And that's what all of us who are a little bit behind them, weren't there in the 60s doing this, but are feeling we're growing into a sense of community spiritually all over the world. And where you guys were just so ahead of the curve. So I want to know, how did you end up at Findhorn? Why did you go there? Kind of, it's your forum now.
Well, all right. Thank you, Nancy. I ended up going there. I was living, my background is a little, I developed two co-housing communities. And
Okay.
one of them was, one was rather small, 12 families. The other one was on 20 acres of land. And
Wow.
we put 10 acres of it in a perpetual land trust and
Mm-hmm.
started a CSA, community supported agriculture, and an organic farm.
Mm-hmm.
And this was an intentional community of about 60 families. And it's still there. It's eastlakecommons.org. It's still up and very successful.
Which state is it
It's in
in?
Georgia,
Okay.
outside Atlanta. So it was a former dairy pasture. So no one was displaced when we developed this land. But
Mm-hmm.
on that property, I met a woman, and I was experiencing co-housing and developing co-housing from scratch. Co-housing is self-developed, managed, and built. So
Mm-hmm.
it's quite something to take on, as a group of people who may not be builders or developers or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But it happened there. And after the years of going through the development process, I just really thought I would want to experience a community was further down the path, that
Mm-hmm.
actually reaping the benefits of their intentional community. So one of the women at the co-housing, her name is Janet Ferguson. So she was Scottish by descent. She was probably in her late 80s at the time. And
Oh,
she
wow.
said to me, "You need to go to Findhorn." And she had been there in 74 when she was like in her mid 50s or late 50s. And she's the one that turned me on to Findhorn. I didn't know anything about it. And I went there, made an arrangements to go there and they have a signature program that most people have to take if they want to continue on pursuing staying at Findhorn. And it's called Experience Week. It's
Mm-hmm.
a 6-day program. I did what I needed to do, and I came home and I said, I'm going to go live there. So
Mm-hmm.
I went through the process of going, how there's a process you enter by doing that. You're
Mm-hmm.
not guaranteed a job there, um, but you may, after you're there a while, apply for staff positions, and then you interview, and there's an attunement, and it's decided if you'll stay and work. And that's what I ended up doing. You don't
Mm-hmm.
get paid money. You got your housing and your food and a stipend of 200 pounds a month, I believe it was. And when they started out, it was like 50 pounds a month. So it went up to 200. And you work Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, in one of the departments at
Mm-hmm.
the foundation. So that's how I came there. And then I worked in several departments, but the two longest ones was I was in the park garden. And my second assignment was in asset development, which was revitalizing or refurbishing or just building new accommodations. Because when Peter and Eileen went there, when they first started accepting guests, because Findhorn does see about 15,000 international visitors a year.
Mm-hmm.
It is a residential, whether it's for 3 days, like a long weekend or a week or 3 month whatever, different length programs. They kind of used brought bungalows onto the properties, like
Mm-hmm.
pre-manufactured little bungalows, and many of them are still there. And some of them were in just not because they weren't maintained, but they just weren't made to last 60 years.
Mm-hmm.
So they're now going through, they've gone through a major rebuilding over the years, last 20 years or so, and replacing housing. And I was initially part of that. So.
Oh, good. What are the other departments that are there?
So they have their basic departments are education, which is the one that sees, and there's a guest department. The guest department and the education are closely tied, but
Mhm.
there's a maintenance department, a dining facility, a food department, the kitchens they call it. One park garden and one food Kulern, which is the food garden.
Mhm.
Um, there's a spiritual and personal development department, a management team, um, health and safety. I mean, you mentioned the living water treatment plant,
Right.
living machine, they call it.
Mhm.
Somebody has to manage that. So it's
Mhm.
just like a little city or a little town, all the departments, all the public service departments you would have,
Mhm.
communications department. Um, those are the main ones I can think of. And then
Well,
you,
there's the one that got me back at Findhorn. I actually saw articles about Findhorn in the early 70s, and at that point, the point of view what on the articles, of course, this is, all depends on the author, was how they were listening to fairies and elves and learning how to garden. So I
Mhm.
got it kind of stuck in my head. And then the other one is they have quite a center of earth energy studiers there, geobiologists that work with ley lines and all that stuff and
Yeah.
work on those sorts of things.
There are individual practitioners there
Mm-hmm.
that are welcome there and that
Mm-hmm.
develop their skills. So I remember Franco Santoro. He's
Mm-hmm.
well known. He's written books on astro shamanism and so forth. But if you're in the foundation, he worked in the guest department,
Mm-hmm.
programs, and he did this other work on the side. And of course, it was available to people.
Yeah.
So one could actually have their own, whether it's a tarot reading or other
Mm-hmm.
um, mediums that you could offer to the community that you did on your own. But you also, if you were going to live within the foundation, would have to work in one of the regular departments.
Right.
Well, yeah, yeah,
And you eat off your garden. That's what you eat.
yes. It's a vegetarian place. They used to serve fish once a week at Clooney Hill, um,
Mm-hmm.
but at the park they never. It was all vegetarian.
Good. I know a lot of people be yay raw.
Yeah.
Okay, go away. I left my phone live because I didn't when I couldn't find you. I was like, oh my god, if she tries to call.
I know.
Sorry about my phone ringing. Um, okay, what I'd like you to explain, and this I didn't get until I spoke with you, is consensus thinking
Mm-hmm.
and how that works when you're in a work group. I think that might interest some of the people here who they're emerging to understand that we can think together as a group and it's not like a weird idea.
Well, they call that attunement.
Okay.
That's the word they use. And so, for instance, in a work department, in a day to day activity, what does that look like? So, in
Mm-hmm.
the morning, everybody goes to their departments. And at the beginning of each shift, because there's 2 shifts a day, 9 to 12 and 2 to 5.
Okay.
And if you have guests in your department, that means people that are taking programs join you in your work department. And so
Okay.
you're educating them with this whole process. But they will have a list. They have each head of a department. They don't have a department head. The person is called a focalizer. And the purpose of that person is to keep the focus, not to direct or to determine what is, how
Mm-hmm.
they're going to go. So the focalizer will hold a meditation with, like, let's say there's 6 people in the maintenance department.
Mm-hmm.
Circle up, they sit down, and the focalizer might say, these are the tasks I would like to get done this morning. And
Mm-hmm.
then the people would close their eyes and he would or she would read out each task. And if you felt
Mm-hmm.
guided, if you tuned into what task you might want to do, you would simply raise your hand. No one else can see if your eyes are closed. He will write your name down next to the task. And the way it ideally works is he has 6 jobs and 6 people have attuned to them.
Mm-hmm.
Only two people will attune to the same task. So then they do another attunement with those two people. And really, what that means is one person gets the feeling if they need to release this and take another task. So they don't do it through an analytical thinking process when you're tuning in. You're feeling into what feels right today. Might not feel right tomorrow, but today, this is the task I want to do. And they use attunement in many, many ways there. Instead of having a debate about what should happen.
Yeah.
Now, of course, they do have a community council. People rotate on and off it, and there could be an average of 30 people on that council made up of members of the community. And sometimes they do bring issues to the council. What are we going to do about this? And there will be some discussion, but they also will have the person that wants to say something, you'll get up, and instead of sitting in your seat and telling people what you want, usually you get up and go into the center of the circle. You can walk, you can stand, you can whatever, and you share your feelings about it. And then they try to come into attunement on what course of action to take. So I think that's quite different than the way typical corporations might make their decisions.
It's not just that, it's different. I used to run a homeowners association. I mean, I was elected to be a citizen member of it. And trust me, that's not how it worked. I mean,
it's very, it takes a bit getting used to, and you have to be willing to have confidence in it. That it's got to work out. But it really does depend on the intention of each person in that circle. Am I willing to tune in as opposed to think in?
Well, that's very heart math talk. You know, if you know anything about heart math, I feel from my center, the second my brain gets involved, it starts filtering it out through those nasty things called words that we all have to suffer with. Eventually, apparently, if the ascension goes away, some future thinkers feel it will. We won't have words anymore. We'll just be tuning into each other. And I'm sure that terrifies people. Like, I don't want to know what they're thinking. It's because we're still too individual. And I think this goes back to Anna Banana's question of, while I believe it's a wonderful way to live, how do you do that? I think her term generational conditioning is, you know, we were raised, I'm presuming your age now. You're a boomer, kind of like me. We were raised in a very ego-driven paradigm, and letting go of that and beginning to understand the other sides of yourself can be very, very tricky for a lot of people. So what I kind of want to eventually work this around to is to talk about intentional groups you come together with. And I have a couple stories of groups of people that I've had meetings with through my practice here, and some things we've seen. But now we're going to start into some questions. Oh, by the way, how long do you stay at Findhorn?
6 years.
Okay, cool. Scottish winters are cold.
Yeah, Findhorn is a bit in a microclimate. So
yeah, because
it rarely snowed right at Findhorn. And considering how far north we were, but because it's between a bay and a peninsula, we did catch this. We were in a bit of a microclimate, and so it rarely got below freezing very much in the winter for us. But it was damp and cloudy and dark in the winter. It gets dark like at 3:30 in the afternoon.
Because the globe's tilted away, and you have this,
And the gardens. If you were in the gardens, you were the two departments that got to actually stop working around 3:30 in the winter, and everybody else had to work till 5.
Oh dear!
You went and did things, yeah.
But you had a wind farm that gave you all the electricity you needed.
Yeah, at the wind farm. That's right. The 3 windmills.
This is what's the difference between tree spirits and fairies? And I've got my own theory on that. But what would you say, if you've not thought about that? I'll take it.
Well, you could take it. I mean, I would say that they do talk about fairies in Findhorn, but I'd say I'm not saying I don't know if there's tree fairies, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I never, that was Dorothy's, that was her bailiwick, so to speak. And she talked more about elementals and devas.
Divas.
Divas. Well, they
Mhm.
say deva,
Okay.
but then fairies. That's maybe.
Okay. Makes my explanation much easier. Every different group labels them differently. So what is a fairy in Ireland is a something else in Germany and a something else. And where did the name come from? Did it come from fairies, which act a whole lot like fairies, but they're from the Middle East? I mean, this is where you have to feel it with your heart. If you feel the energy's there and you feel it's welcoming, it doesn't matter what its name is,
Yeah.
go for it. And do we think a lot of people who work with energies out of plants here do feel that trees have a kind of different spirit than other plants, which they would align with elves and gnomes and fairies. And but you have to say, okay, this is a fairy tradition from this part of the world, and I'm in the process because I got called to go deal with elementals, figuring out how their definitions work. And most of my definitions of fairies that are just the innate ones that I know is because I came from an off the boat Irish family. So you can imagine who I heard about. But and fairy and Irish didn't have very many dragons, but that's the first critters I really dealt with. And there is a clear definition in what I found out, and I think it's probably true for the other elementals, is your own brain consciousness and even how your heart feels them is based on your ego. And the Western ego is I have to conquer it. So all of our dragon stories are killing them. You go to the Asian countries, and some of them think they're totally beneficent and they open their temples up so that they can fly through. In other places, they're the good and the bad. They're a perfect reflection of our own human nature. So when you're thinking about fairies and tree spites, it's really, do you feel this fun thing there? And ask it what it wants to be called. I mean, in your heart, ask what it wants to be called. It'll tell you.
Well, I just want to say
Okay.
one more thing about that is that they are big on angels in Findhorn.
I
So
know.
there is an angel of Findhorn, and they developed the angel cards and the transformation game there. So
That comes up here. This is our very next question. Is this one? I've seen the teeny angel cards. They were developed at Findhorn as part of the transformation game. And
right.
I believe, by the way, I believe in angels. I think, okay, I shouldn't say I think. What I feel is the energy is somewhat different. And for some people, because of how faith has been handled in this country, talking to an angel is more than they can handle. So if you want to call it something else, fine. It's all energy to me. So you've seen the teeny angel cards too, then, haven't you?
Well, the angel cards are used. I have a deck of them here, but the angel cards are used every day in the departments. Um,
Mm-hmm.
uh, but especially on Fridays at the end of the week, when if
Mm-hmm.
you have guests that you've been hosting for
Mm-hmm.
some of the shifts, we have like a closing ceremony with them. So right before the shift ends, 15 minutes or so, we all stop work early and we have a bowl of angel cards and we ask everyone to pick one, and then
Mm-hmm.
the guests get to kind of say what they feel about the card they picked. They all have qualities on them of
Right.
some sort, and they're connected to the chakras. So it would be a very meaningful closure for the guests at the end of the week to reflect on what quality they picked and what the angels wanted to uh, bring forward that day.
Cool. That's great. I
Yeah.
didn't know there was such a thing there. I'll have to look them up, and maybe we'll do another show together and we can talk about them because you've had much more experience. By the way, Kathleen, you did read cards at one point, right?
I do. I mean, card readings. Yeah, I do.
Mhm.
I use a deck called the Osho Tarot deck.
Mhm.
And then with COVID, I stopped. that all kind of stopped at the moment. So
Yeah, well,
yeah.
you know, you never know. For those of you who are wondering, I'm gonna post Eileen. I'm sorry, giving you her name. I'm gonna post Kathleen's email at the very end. So have your pencil and paper ready. Okay. Uh, we're going to. I'm going to try Nancy Jean to see what trees pull me in. We have a 2-acre forest on my land. Thank you. Well, the 2-acre forest may be the whole trip, guy. I hate to tell you, but and I don't know if that's a guy or not because I can't tell. Okay, and this is another person who talks about speaking to nature. About talking to trees, they sort of whisper. We can talk all at once about everything. They make me feel peaceful and windswept. But as you pointed out, you could concentrate on any plant. If you wanted to become an understanding of the universal tomato plant, you could really concentrate and work with that, right?
Right. Absolutely. Ask them what they need, what they want, and you might get a sense of what they need or what they want.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then if I don't hide them, then they start popping up all over again. Let's see what we got else. We got any more comments? Because I have a couple more things to bring up from my notes. This is for a person who's in the room. My hip is still great. Thank you for healing. That's another reader that happens to be in a room. That's a friend of mine, so she gets hands up. Dozen Cats is here. Thank you. Thank you. She just had her channelversary. She's been on for a year. And let's see what we're talking about. Okay, and okay, this is what she's saying. She feels like the exes have been the forgotten generation, encouraged to work hard and accumulate all the stuff as if a false sense of security while raising ourselves. I can't speak to that. We're boomers. The thing is, you just kind of have to decide if that's how your parents raised you, that's what you were raised to do. You just have to do the best you can with it. I had a friend of mine who's a therapist who said, if everybody has a child and holds them and wants to give them, if you could put it into one summary, that all the love they could give that child in the world would be $1 bill. Every parent, for the most part, comes in either knowing that's what they're going to try to do or already acknowledging them that they're down at the 50 cents, 25 cents level of how much love they have to give. And you just have to forgive them because they're burdened with having to live with that. So, and I think if we can start to get to where we open our heart and do start to intentionally include people, we will, it'll help a little bit. And that's one of the things I try to do. I try to show people on my channel different ways that people sing. Okay, has Findhorn changed since Eileen Caddy's passing? She passed in the late 80s?
No, she passed when I was there.
Oh, okay.
She passed, I think it was 2008.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I got an 8 in the number, right?
She was I think she was 96 or 97.
Mm-hmm.
Eileen hadn't given guidance. She had made an announcement one day, and this was probably in the 80s, where she no longer was going to give guidance to the community from her, that they had to actually start seeking, because she's, of course, interested in making this community sustainable.
Right.
She said, so there are 4 sanctuaries at Findhorn. The main sanctuary, a small little St. Germain sanctuary, and then this little park nature sanctuary. That's at the park. And then there's a sanctuary at Clooney. And I bring this up because at 9 a.m. at 8:40 every morning and at 5:10 every afternoon, there was all the main sanctuaries had a meditation before you started your day and at the end of your day. And Eileen would say, we need to seek our own guidance. So Eileen was still a very active member of the community. Maybe she taught some programs and so forth. But in the years I was there, you rarely saw her. She was quite infirm at the time, but totally with it, But she didn't give her guidance any longer. So, I really don't know how much it's probably changed since her passing. They still post her. She wrote a book called Opening Doors Within, probably her most famous book, which was a 365-day meditations or affirmation messages. And every Friday they still post it. If you're on the newsletter, you can get her daily affirmation. Or you could read her book. And they're all very universal messages of hope and so forth. And I mean, her mantra is listen to your own inner voice. So she would have to tell people that their inner voice was just as important as hers. But she just showed the way of how, if you do it, this is what can happen. Because it took a lot of belief to think that when she got a message in 1968 that this place would become, people from all over the world would come there. I don't think many people would have believed her. But indeed, she did win the Order of the British Empire Award from the Queen in her lifetime. So she was recognized, and things are, I mean, I haven't been there since 2015. But I am a resource person there, and I'm still in touch. And some things have changed. But they're holding pretty true to her wisdom and her guidance.
And by the way, so you guys understand how I found Kathleen. I was on Findhorn's site, and it had resources. So I was looking through to create this sorts of a program and find other things. And Kathleen was listed as the resource person that was in the state I live in. There's one and sometimes two names in every state. So if you live, and I'm sure it's international because I know there's at least one person here from Finland, that if you go and if you want to go and look at what's going on there, you can see it. And you can maybe get in touch with the person in your area and say, where can I go see or hear or be part of this community? Although after last week, I think many of us that live in Texas thinks we're a lost cause, but what can I say? There's no way I can apologize for an entire state. Okay, that kind of takes away the last of the questions that are posted right now. And this is, get your pens and pencils out. This is Kathleen's email, and she's, like she said, she's a card reader. She was a centered and spiritual person before she kind of got there. I think a lot of us are, but we just don't have a path. And I think what the Caddies and Dorothy Maclean came up with was a path to help people. And I got to think it's the way things are going to go in the future for us. And could you talk? I know one thing you can talk about, and I'll type up a banner about it. Talk about the book you said that's braiding seagrass.
Oh, braiding. Yeah. Yeah, there's a couple of things. I know that one person from Gen X, like she said, or he said, how can I do think if you have any co-housing communities that are within your reach, contacting one and visiting, and even perhaps considering moving into a co-housing community would be a very good support system for people who want to change the way they're living. And then I was mentioning to Nancy that I've been reading this book, Braiding Sweetgrass, I'll get the book right over here.
I've got it. I've got the name. I'm typing it right now.
All right. Yeah. I just wanted to show the picture of it.
Oh yeah, that's pretty.
It's very pretty, yeah. And yeah, so it's by Robin Wall Kimmerer. And she is a member of a native tribe, but she's a botanist. And she's written this lovely book. I mean, it's about 10 years old now, but it has a very big following. And each individual chapter is like a meditation in itself on the natural world. And they don't refer to elementals and so forth, but they definitely refer to that animals and plants are not lesser than human beings, that we all living things have a soul and an essence, and we need to respect each other. And she just gives you some very nice different language with which to embrace this philosophy, I guess is how I'd say it.
Well, it's another one that's based in um it's based in our culture, you
Right.
know.
She lives in upper state New York.
And yeah, I found a bunch of mine. I found them all kinds of prices. I found them used from under $10
Yeah.
to the whole audiobook package at 30, you know. It's just I'm going to be getting it. Obviously, I've been looking at it and thinking about it, but
Yeah. I
cuz
think it is a book worth owning because, like I said, I'll just pick it up and read one chapter just as a reminder, a meditation. Yeah. She's also quite poetical in her writing. It's very easy to read her. Even though she does actually get into the science of some things like how trees communicate with one another and how plants companion planting can be so helpful and so forth.
yeah, if you don't know what companion planting is because you've never had a garden, and since I think more and more people are going to break down and finally have gardens, um, they what it is if you plant something that's low lying to the ground, then you plant something a little taller that shades it if it needs shade, and then you plant a plant that needs to vine up a tall plant next to a tall plant. I used to have a big garden, and believe it or not, Texas A&M they would teach you how to take care of your own back garden, and they had a whole lot of things about don't plant these two plants together because they don't like each other. Chemically, whatever, they don't. A lot of things don't like to grow near onions, and so you put your little onion patch at the far end, and then you can turn the soil over and get it all ready, and put a mid-spring plant there. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff like that out there, and it really makes gardening easier. It makes it less of a, oh my God, I can't figure this out. So, did you have any parting comments you wanted to make? And then I'll kind of wrap it up and then everybody can go home.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you inviting me, Nancy. It was really nice to talk about Findhorn again. And I think they just are a great role model. And people go there and say they, like one of the books written about Findhorn by Paul Hawkins is The Magic of Findhorn.
Mm-hmm.
What is this magic thing that we're feeling? And
Mm-hmm.
I think it's, in a word, it's like a cooperative reciprocity.
Mm-hmm.
Always a giving and a taking, constantly being um, circled in life.
Mm-hmm.
And so I hope this was helpful to some of you and might get you to look up some avenues that you can pursue to support yourselves in your work.
Well, one of the things I want to mention is you mentioned it to me and I looked it up. This week is Findhorn's 60th anniversary, and they are actually having some free online
Yes,
resources
they
made
are.
available to people. There's a lot of stuff you can go get on their things, so you can see um, like the daily newsletter, the 365 sort of meditation book, those sorts of things. They're all on there. Findhorn apparently at one point was a little late in getting part of the tech community, but it looks great now.
Yeah, it does. They were a little slow coming to that because they're, just the fact that they named their signature program Experience Week.
Mm-hmm.
It really was difficult for Westerners in particular. There's no goal to this week. There's no curriculum this is the end result. and what they would describe it as a heart-opening experience.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty hard to do online, so
Yeah.
instill, but that's what they were about. So I think about now they're doing well with their online presence, I think. Yeah.
Well, and I think some of that can be converted into online. And I'm not just saying that because I have an online kind of community, but there's a lot that we can learn from each other. And I had a group of people we're working with my garden. That I'm not going to show you a picture of right now because I didn't set the camera up. Sorry, lazy today. But we were throwing stones in a couple weeks ago. And we were we don't do yes, no, or hard political things, but people were just concerned about Joe Biden. They said, how's Joe Biden going to feel on election day? And we got the most messed up answers. I mean, none of our stuff seemed to mesh together. And then one of the women who's far, far from me in Connecticut said, why don't we look at the 12th? She said, somehow I got a feeling the 12th is important. And so we all rolled the 12th, and he was happy, wasn't even what all those stones were about. And for those of you who don't know it, the 12th was the day that the Senate was declared for the Democrats, which would make Joe very happy. It happens that he's happy about a political thing, but I also think he's happy because he could do more for people the way he wants to. But if I hadn't been in that community, I wouldn't have had a chance to experience that. And since we all throw our stones at the same time and look at the same issues, it's somewhat like not anywhere close to the level you guys are at, but it's a way, if you can get into a community of readers or people who share your interests, whether it's pendulums, whether it's talking about trees or whatever, even if you can get into a community that familiarizes itself with Findhorn and shared communities, that's a great way to build an understanding of those intentions and how to grow together, because we're not all in the same space. We're not all the same generation, but we can get along. I mean, we can make this work. And I think we need to keep reminding ourselves of that. And you've lived it. So you're just a very special person. And I'm going to keep your email, girl. So you're going to be hearing from me again.
Please do. And if any of you don't want to email me, I am on Instagram at Poetical Commentary. And I do post my poetry there. And a lot of it is nature-based, but
Oh, cool.
it's just easier to maybe, connect with somebody that way. Yeah.
It's what you tell me what it is.
At Poetical Commentary, like political commentary, but this is poetical commentary.
One word? Is that one word?
Word.
I'm going to put it up for you guys because that's something I don't do. Instagram. Oh, it went away. Okay, here it goes. Show. There you go.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yes, it is. It is.
Oh, good.
Just for those of you who might, so, I mean, since I've left Findhorn, one of my, you're also exposed to all different ways of creativity. Like they have a program called Everybody's an Artist. Well, I will say, when I went there, I was around 50. And I just never thought that I was an artist in any shape, form. And boy, did I learn a lot different up there. I mean, and just, from doing collages to, it just opened up this whole other world. And hence I started writing poetry too. So I was writing it a little before, but not, I do it more now. I do for myself, my own self-expression. So that was good. That was a gift, Findhorn, to me.
And we all think we're not what we might want to be, but that's not true.
Right.
Anyway, we're getting thanked for all how wonderful this discussion is, from Rising Star Astrology, Lady Silver 3, Gigi Pardo, Lord, I keep calling you my last name, and Rohanna Wolf, who said she knew about Findhorn, but this is raising her consciousness about it again. I think it's just time for us to start doing more of that. And thank you for Skywalking with Moon, Ivana Intuitive. This is my name checking, guys. I don't normally do this. Gina M. Nancy Castro. Hi, girl. I hope your back's all better now. She had back surgery. Crone Zone, Conversations with the Ancients. and dozen cats. I have a lot of readers who follow what I do, and I love it because that means it gets sent into a lot broader practices. Although I love my individual people who just want to show up. Strawberry Rhubarb Tarot is here too, and Dream Journey 1. And then I will let you go because we're at 55 minutes. Spiritual Rain. But anyway, I'm going to let Kathleen go because
Thanks again.
Things to go do and people to see.
Yeah.
Bye.
We'll see you again. Bye-bye.